This meeting of the Norwood City Council is hereby called to order. Please rise for the prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in these council chambers. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo. Present. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Here. Ms. Stevenson.
Present.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Here.
Mr. Sanker.
Here.
Mr. Breeden.
Here.
We have a lot of amendments to consider for tonight's agenda, so I'm going to ask for your patience as I request them, talk about how that could change our agenda, and then ask for your consideration, whether or not you'd like to make a motion. This evening, we've been asked to add an ordinance regarding the authorizing of the Service Safety Director to enter into agreement to purchase eGov computer specialized accounting software and to enter an agreement to provide for training and declaring an emergency. We've been asked to add communication from Tim Gary regarding a letter from Service Safety Director. We've been asked to add an ordinance a lot here. Let me find the title. Authorizing the auditor, thank you, to approve a then and now certificate for the Building Assessment Fund 81 to cover the cost of an invoice from the Ohio Board of Building Standards for 2018 for a total of $10,282.14 and declaring an emergency. We've also been asked to consider a new communication, a letter from the Service Safety Director. I may have been a duplicate, and add an administrative report from the city auditor. In order to do all that well, we'd need to reorder the agenda. And reordering would look like considering the resolutions prior to the current number 2 introductory readings of ordinances. So we'd have the 2 resolutions there. We would add the eGov ordinance as number 5 and add the then and now ordinance as number 6. Because some of the communication requires presentation, the ask is also that we would consider the communication from Tim Gary after the consideration of the minutes. And that would include a presentation from associates with JMA, consultants rather. And then prior to consideration of the 3rd reading of ordinances, we would have a presentation from Ms. Penny Worley. I am going to pause and look at my colleagues and see, did I get it all?
Yes, Madam President, the new attachment for the Exhibit A.
Yes.
For appropriation ordinance.
Our current ordinance number 1 has a new attachment, Exhibit A, on your desk. And the auditor is here and we'll speak to that when we get to that. So those are the requested amendments and the requested order for considering those and the corresponding presentations. Mr. Thompson.
Move to amend the agenda as you've stated.
Seconded by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Yes. Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Madam President. Move to approve both sets of minutes as of read.
Mr. Bonsall?
Well, I would second that motion.
Any discussion? I have a request. Mr. Clark, would you be willing to depackage your motion? I was not present for the April 30th meeting and would therefore abstain from that approval.
Sure. I'll go ahead and move that we approve the minutes from the April 23rd, 2019 meeting as of read.
Mr. Bonsall, would you adjust as well?
I would.
Okay. Any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Yes. Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Now, Mrs. Hanrahan.
We're all out
Yes.
of place.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All right, the second under minutes of previous meetings, special meeting April 30th. Mr. Clark?
Yes, I move that we approve the minutes of the April 30th meeting.
Mr. Bonsall?
I would second that motion.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please. Oh, I can say this again. I will be abstaining. I was not in attendance at the meeting. Okay, any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Yes. Ms. Stevenson?
Abstain.
Mrs. Hanrahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
The next agenda item, request to address council. Oh, I'm so sorry, on agenda items will follow after our letter. Would you read the letter,
Yep.
please?
Dear Mrs. Lake and members of council, this is to inform you that there is an apparent landslide-type condition present behind 2 to 3 homes on Mound View Drive, adjacent to city property. I am asking for approval of the expenditure of $21,000 to $25,000 so that the city's consulting engineers, JMA Consultants, can move forward with arranging for geotechnical engineers to do soil boring testing to learn what is causing this landslide-type condition and to ascertain whose responsibility it is to correct any problems identified. The proposal the city has received is attached for your reference. I also request that JMA Consultants, John Gady, P.E., and some appropriate representative of the geotechnical engineering firm be permitted to address council concerning the proposal and to answer any questions at council's Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 regular meeting. Thank you. Sincerely, Joseph C. Gears, Director, Public Service Safety.
Is Mr. Getty here? Would you come on up, please? Sure. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, that'd be great here. Before you begin, though, could we have a motion to receive and file?
Well,
Mr. Sanker?
pardon me, I think we may want to, if we receive and file, we're approving the expenditure. I think we may want to hear from these technicians prior to doing that.
I believe this has a separate contract with it. This is,
I believe on the cover letter, though, it says, ma'am, I'm asking for approval of the expenditure.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Sanker. Mr. Getty, would you go ahead and proceed and help us understand what this is?
Sure. My name's John Godey. I'm with JMA Consultants. I'm here with Jeff Dunlap with Terracon. They're geotechnical engineers that we work with on a lot of different projects. I think it might be appropriate to give you some background on how we've gotten involved on this project. Back in April, maybe end of March, got a call from Joe Gears. He had indicated there was some issues with slide and a storm sewer at 2507 Mound View. So what I did and what we normally will do is do some courthouse research to see if there is a public storm sewer easement that might have in the ownership of the city of Norwood. We did find a 15-foot sewer easement that runs from Mound View to the south towards Highland Avenue down the hill. It looks like it was executed back in 1944. It's just an old sewer easement. Doesn't say it's storm sewer, doesn't say exactly what it is, but that's not really unusual. So once we found that there is an easement to the city of Norwood for storm sewer in that area, I went ahead and contacted Jeff with Terracon to see if we could arrange to meet out at the property and take a look at it and kind of get a feel for what might be going on out there. We met with Joe Gears back on April 18th. Met with the contractor because it is quite hilly. The hillside behind these houses going down toward Highland. I wanted the contractor to be able to see, what kind of equipment can this even be physically accessed from the low end or from the high end, and also Jeff had to see that as well. And that was the first time we had seen evidence of the landslide. Jeff, we spent probably a good half hour, 45 minutes out there. Jeff a little bit longer actually. And what we recommended to Joe was that to us have Jeff prepare a proposal to study what's going on out there. And the only way that they can do that is to take soil borings and monitor them, and what they'll be able to do from that, not to take away from what Jeff might say, is they can try and ascertain what the cause is. It's probably a good chance that there's a number of issues that led to the slide. Extremely high moisture. The sewer has pulled away from the manhole. We went down the hillside and you can see where there's a failure of the storm sewer, and where a new storm sewer had been built, I think within the past few years. But what Terracon then did was prepare the proposal that I believe all of you have a copy of. I submitted that to Joe Gears, and he had asked for a summary of what really, what is that proposal saying? And that is the summary of geotechnical engineering proposal that hopefully you all have. And with that, I think most of the questions Jeff can answer. I'll try and answer whatever I can, but feel free to ask us whatever you might be on your mind.
Did you want to say something?
I think you probably.
I'm here mainly to answer questions if you have them.
They do have to access this with a big piece of equipment, and Jeff would be familiar with, what's required. We will need permission through Norwood from the property owners, at least 3 property owners, to access this with their drill rig, and he can kind of explain what they're going to do out in back of these houses, because it is on private property.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Little background, the homeowners had called me back in March when they were going to have some work done in the back. But when they had the contractor come and look, the bottom of the one foundation of the one was washing away, and the one next door was doing the same. And so at that point in time, we contacted Mr. Gears, and then I believe Clint came up and started at least looking around to see what was going on. Went back up during the heavy rain, and you could see where it was deteriorating quite rapidly. So that kind of got the ball rolling as far as to get this going, because just visually looking at it, you can't determine what actually is the root cause of the deterioration. And when you stand in the back, that hill drops pretty well straight down back onto Highland Avenue. And so the best solution really is to find out what actually is causing this. And I believe, I'm not speaking for them, but I believe the homeowners would be happy with any type of testing that would be done to kind of determine what actually is the root cause of the deterioration of the hillside there. So when you talk about equipment, would you be accessing from down on Highland coming up, or from both? Okay.
Yeah. The landslide itself, it isn't a landslide. There's a bowl-shaped headscarp that basically is along the side of the pool at 2507 and extends into the backyard at 2503. And then it gets pretty thickly vegetated. It's kind of hard to tell if it goes further on or not.
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Sure, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And then if you look down below towards Highland, there's actually a defined toe bulge, which is a classic slump type feature in geotechnical engineering. Basically what happens is it either rotates or it translates laterally. So what happens, you get a shear area upslope, and then as it moves down slope, it pushes things out kind of like a bulldozer, and you get a mound out in front. So it does have the appearance that it is a landslide. You guys keep talking about how we're going to determine what the cause is. I can't promise you that we're going to be able to tell you an actual root cause. Usually when these things happen, it's a myriad of different things. Anytime you have a failure, usually what happens is you have several small things that happen. Just so happens they happened all at once. It could be that the hillside creeped over time, and that slow movement pulled away the basically the manhole from the sewer. Could be a combination of the water that's cascading over the hillside, causing some erosion. You erode away the toe, that pulls away the resisting forces. And plus, just the extremely wet weather we've been having. So there's at least 3 probably things that lend to the landslide. In order to evaluate this slope and determine, where the landslide is occurring, what depth, because the depth of the landslide is basically going to control the cost of the remediation. We basically have to develop a cross section through the slope so that we can basically determine, 1, how deep is it to rock, 2, where's the slide plane occurring depth-wise, and then 3, just to gather geotechnical parameters so we can basically design a fix or a proposed fix. So what we're going to do is access the top of the slope. I think we're going to drill 2 borings up top. The 2 up top, one would be performed pretty much between 2503 and 2507, just get an idea how deep it is to rock up there and what types of soils are present. We performed one behind 2503, and we're proposing to install an inclinometer. An inclinometer will tell us basically what depth that slide plane is occurring. If I don't have that data, I basically have to assume it's sliding all the way down to bedrock. This looks like it's a slope that they placed fill on probably during original construction, so it could be pretty deep to rock. And basically, if you start getting 20, 30 feet to rock, and we're assuming the slide plane's there, usually you have to have tiebacks and things like that, which basically just increase the cost of the fix dramatically. So then we're also going to perform 3 downslope. 2 of them is basically to complete the cross section of the slope, and then we're going to perform 1 laterally along the toe of the bulge so that we can basically determine what the top of rock and everything is doing along the landslide itself, because the fix here is more than likely going to be a drilled shaft retaining wall at the toe, which is going to act like a buttress, and it's basically going to provide enough shear strength so that it will quit sliding. It's kind of like just adding additional shear strength to the soil. So that's the purpose of the investigation, and the thought process that goes on as to how we developed it. The equipment we're going to use is actually a track drill rig. It'll probably be a remote control drill rig. They're generally 18 to 20 feet long. They have rubber tracks. They'll have a drill on it that's capable of, split spoon sampling, driving a hammer, taking soil samples, as well as rock coring. We're going to install the inclinometers. One of them would be installed behind 2503, and we'd use a flush mount. So it's going to have a small concrete pad and have like a little manhole on top of it, kind of like maybe what one of your gas meters might have on it, or a water meter. And what we do to read that is this is a PVC pipe. It's got vertical grooves in it. They're offset 90 degrees from each other, so there's 4 sets of grooves. You take the inclinometer, you basically roll it down, and you stop at even depth intervals, and you get a baseline reading. So then what'll happen is we'll go back later, take another inclinometer reading, and it'll tell us how much laterally it's moved since that initial baseline reading. And what you basically want to see is where that movement's occurring. And like I said, if it's occurring up in, like, say, maybe the fill natural soil interface, that would probably be a lot less expensive fix than if it's sliding all the way down to rock. Trying to think what else I could tell you.
Are there any other questions? Acting Mayor Lake, do you have some information?
Thank you, Madam President. Pro Tem, thank you. I happened to visit quite by accident one of the houses involved over the weekend, and one of the woman who lived next door stopped me, and we went in the backyard. And I can tell you from what I saw, I think it's imperative that we approve this expenditure and find out what's going on. The one house, the porch is pulling away, and the patio is pulling away from a small retaining wall. On the other side where the pool is, her fence is going down the hill. She had to put reinforcements on the side slots of her fence to keep it from going down the hill, and there's a swimming pool there. I'm certainly no engineer or don't totally understand all the terms that you're using, but I think it's imperative that we find out at least what's going on, and so that we know exactly what we're looking at. I think the property owners with that storm sewer down there, I think we have an obligation to at least find out what's going on.
We'll go with, thank you. Mrs. Hanrahan, I thought I saw your hand earlier.
Yes. How long, somebody tell me how long this has been going on? How long the erosion's been happening? Is it something that just started and it's progressed fast, or has it been a slow progression?
My understanding from talking to the homeowner at 2507 is basically she started to build a retaining wall along the one side of her pool. They started it in the fall. The weather turned bad, so the contractor left. He came back in the spring and then found that basically the retaining wall that he had built up to that point had been damaged, and that's when he basically alerted the homeowner that there was an issue. And I think that was in March.
Thank you.
There is, in the packet we have, I think it's project understanding 2 of 3 is what it says at the bottom. There's an overview of the site. There's some information in here about previous work on the site through contracts hired by the city and previous residential too. I know we just got this, but I did note that was in here. Is that a follow-up?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan?
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Yes, we've just got this. We haven't had a chance to read it. It's really hard to try to read everything when it's just handed to us. What I'm trying to get to is there, since we just got this and it's a large sum of money, is there any danger in waiting 2 more weeks to pass this, letting this?
Landslides they're kind of hard to predict. I mean, I've seen them where, something similar to this, it'll stay this way for months. I've also seen it where they can basically accelerate and progress fairly rapidly. Right now, the nice thing about this particular landslide is it basically stops at the swimming pool. I didn't see any evidence on the 18th of April that there was any evidence indicating that the pool had translated down slope. Now, I'm not saying that sometime in the future that may not occur, but right now, the damage that's actually out there, it is a landslide. It seems like a lot of damage, but it could definitely be a lot worse.
Could I address that as well?
Please.
One of the things that also that matters is their equipment schedule. This report is probably 4 months out. The issuance of the report is 3 to 4 months out. Jeff knows the status of their schedule for their equipment. So I think you said it was booked to start going into June.
Yes, that's correct.
So they wouldn't, the earliest they'd be able to get the equipment out there is sometime in June.
We actually had one project that's probably going to finish up a little earlier, so it's probably going to be about the first or second week of June if it was authorized, this week before we can even get out there and start drilling.
So if we put this off for another 2 weeks approving it, it's not going to,
It's going to push our schedule back 2 weeks
2
because
weeks,
I can't
wow.
put it on the schedule until I have basically approval.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I just had a question about the actual drilling rig
Sure.
that you're using, just because I assume that you're probably going to have to take it through the people's yards
That's correct.
to get around to the back, and it's a fairly sizable piece of equipment. Can we expect there to be damage on those properties? I know a rubber tracked kind of
Yeah.
thing is going to be spreading that weight out, but still.
The rubber tracks do help, but if it's as wet as it has been, it's going to leave some tracks and some ruts. Usually what happens is as you're going in a straight line, it'll leave some indentations. As soon as you actually go to turn the rig, because what it does is it holds one track steady and turns the other, and it can tear it up. And, we've specifically stated here that we don't have reclamation costs.
I think it's safe to say that there will be damage to the sod areas. Also, they have to access 3 of the moorings from the property on Highland. And I think there's some clearing within
Yes.
the easement that has to be done. Brush, like you said, small trees. So they have to get in there and clear that out ahead of time. And you have that staying on site, correct? The brush and.
Yes, the brush will just be basically pushed off to the side. We don't have costs for bringing that down the slope and removing it from the site.
The reason I say is I think it needs to be the property owners because you do need permission from 3 property owners. I'm not sure how the one on Highland seems to be a business or an LLC that owns it. So you may know them, but you won't access that until you have written permission.
That's correct.
And they may have questions on what kind of damage is going to happen to their property. So I think you have to travel over a period. It's not just in the easement that they would be clearing brush. They have to access their site from the west and then drive it across their property. The last time we were out there, it was really, really wet. That hillside all comes down there and it drains, and I think it stays fairly wet most of the time.
Some of the brush that would have to be removed are pretty much is outside the easement almost the whole way up, because I think the easement pretty much covers the swale. And we can't travel up the swale and then get out of it because it's just too steep towards the crest of the slope.
So a follow-up, Mr.
Quick
Thompson?
follow-up. In situations like this, when you've done things like this and damage is caused to residential property, is that something that property insurance covers, or do you find that the city covers, or do we assume that damage happens? I'm just curious. I know it's nothing that you all have to deal with, but
Generally, it's just negotiated ahead of time who's going to be responsible
okay.
for taking care of it. Chances are the homeowner's insurance will not.
So essentially, they don't do that type of work, and that's why they didn't include it in their cost. If it's going to be done, they would subcontract that out to some firm and then add that cost to the number that you have in the proposal.
Okay, thank you.
So, or it could be, negotiated, as Jeff said, with the property owner if they decide they want to take care of it themselves.
Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So my question kind of has to do with who normally actually pays for these boring, I'm definitely open to doing this, but is it normally the city, like if this were to have happened in Cincinnati or another municipality that has hills, is it normally the city that pays for the geotechnical engineering work, or is it really us doing it? Is it really us doing it just because of that storm? I guess the sewer right away or the sewer easement. Is that the only reason why it's kind of coming to us at this point?
I believe so. I would say that is if that easement wasn't in place, first thing we did was look to see if there was an easement, because in some instances there's storm sewers installed without inspection, and it's private, and it's essentially the homeowner's responsibility to maintain that. And we did find a public storm sewer, not a storm, public sewer easement to Norwood in that regard, and that's kind of what precipitated us going out to the site to take a look at it.
Okay, great.
Is there a follow-up there?
Nope, that answered the question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Madam President. So, I tried to find it, but our last downpour we had, I do have some footage of Highland Avenue, and right where you're talking, and it is a river coming down, so it's not surprising that erosion and this landslide's happening. I do have some video footage of that, and it's substantial. I guess my question would be, since you guys maybe have seen this, more experience in this, are we to assume that we have a sewer failure, or is this something that looks like it's just general erosion? Because this is a pretty steep hill right here. This is fairly steep, and we've had some serious rains here in Norwood over the past few years. Is this something that could just be general erosion, or do we potentially think we have a sewer failure?
I think there is a sewer failure. We went down the hillside, and you have to go down, and it is very hard to get down that hillside. It's so steep.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you had seen it, but there's a manhole that where storm sewer pipe had been pulled away from the manhole, or vice versa.
Okay.
Well, actually, it looks like the storm sewer hasn't moved. It looks like the storm pipe has been pulled away. So that in itself, now I'm not sure how that manifested itself. Could have been 20 years ago. This pipe is old and rusty, and it's probably been there for 60, 70 years. So.
Understood. And if we're talking about the top of the sewer manhole, and then the bottom is eroding away from the actual manhole, is that what we're? Because I haven't seen that yet.
Okay, the storm sewer pipe has actually been pulled away.
Okay.
From the manhole.
Okay. I need to get over there.
There's two manholes. There's one adjacent to the pool, and then there's one down slope, basically at the toe of a very steep slope. An old brick manhole, I think is the one you're talking about, correct?
Yeah. So, thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you. It's about the same subject. So just to be clear, is there been a determination made yet about whether the sewer failure caused the slide, or if the sewer failure was like a casualty of the erosion? Is there any? There's no way to know that.
We have not determined that at this point.
And
know that we could.
We may not be able to do
that. So then, if it says that you don't know if you could, well, this could just be a topic for a future day, but I would just be, I'll see what the report says, and I'll probably ask you additional questions then.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you. I believe what they want to do, thank you, Madam President, is they want to dig a hole and see how much that this is sliding, right? You're going to determine, once you dig this hole, you say you put this, and that's going to tell you exactly where the slide is, how deep the slide is. In other words, if 6 feet of that hill sliding, or if 20 feet of that hill sliding. That's what you're trying to determine with these drills that you're going to do. Am I correct?
That's correct, and because after knowing that, you'll know what's going to take to fix it.
Yes, sir.
Because this isn't the fix. It's analyzing the conditions there.
Yes, sir.
That will be utilized to determine what the fix will be.
That is correct. It's just a study at this point.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes, and so that is going to be the question that we have to ask as council when it gets closer, when we actually know what the fix is going to be, is what caused it and what liability. I don't even know what liability cities even have in these situations, especially if it has nothing to do with the sewer. That could be a very expensive fix for the homeowners to have to do, and so we'll have to be just we'll have to pay attention to that, but hopefully there would be as much information as possible to say, yes, that sewer caused it, or no, the sewer didn't cause it, because the city doesn't actually own the property that is sliding. So anyways, but I am very sympathetic to the homeowners here, and I do think that we should approve this expenditure, because I think that I think we should find out and ensure that it wasn't us that did it, and help the homeowners find out what actually they're going to need to solve it. So, yeah.
Mr. Braden.
I'm sorry, one last thing. This is it. This is my
You're
last
fine.
one.
You're fine.
So you've determined that that's the only way to figure out exactly. So I know that they have scopes. There's no way of scoping that sewer to find something out, or is that something else that might go on, or
That's something that probably needs to go on parallel to our study, is
Okay.
basically run a scope through there, because I
Sure.
suspect that pipe from basically Mountain View Avenue to that first manhole is probably broken there somewhere.
Okay.
Because she actually has pictures after a heavy rainstorm on March 14th or whatever day it was, that basically there was water ponded there on Mountain View. So something is blocking that sewer.
To be honest, that I don't find necessarily unusual. It's possible we can do that. We can have a company run a TV, they actually run a TV monitor through the storm sewer, as long as they can access it, and it will tell you if there's a collapse in the sewer, and that would be up closer to Mountain View itself. But it won't. I mean, it's nothing. It's separate from the sewer that's down the hillside. The area that was ponding could have been just an extremely large event. Could have been a combination of debris over the sewer grate. It is a low point, so it's the only place that can go is right there in front of that house. There's nowhere else to go. If it fills that up, if it is collapsed, if it's plugged, partially plugged, it is going to pond a little bit, and then over time it'll drain out. But we can have a company TV that sewer to see if there's anything in that.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you. Do you by any chance have any photos of the damage? You say the porch is away from the house and the wall, the retaining wall has been damaged?
I do not. Jeff, do you have some on your phone?
That's what I'm checking. My phone.
My concern, to be honest,
There are pictures. I've seen them.
Uh-huh.
But the property owner showed them to me when I was out there. She had pictures of that, and that she had taken over time. I don't have them.
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay, and my concern with this is we have other residents who have waited for years to get sewers fixed, and they've been flooded forever. And this is a large amount of money. I mean, I know on South Jefferson, they were flooded into their houses for years until we could get the money to fix it. And I think with this amount of money, I'm really torn on this. Nobody wants to see anybody's property damaged. But just seeing that this was given to us tonight, and we really haven't had a chance to read it, to go over it, is a bit concerning. However, it's back to I don't want to see anybody's property damaged either. So I will admit I'm torn on this one.
So I'd like to ask a question to both our consultants and then to our auditor. The proposal that you shared with us today, I heard you say that if we wait 2 weeks to consider it, this would move your schedule back 2 weeks. Would the proposal quote still be valid?
The proposal is valid for 60 days, I think we've stated in there.
Thank you. And then the question for the auditor, is the amount that's listed here in this letter, have we appropriated enough funds where this could take place, or would we actually need to have a change to our appropriations to consider this?
Yes, Madam President. Pro Tem.
Yep.
Currently under public lands and buildings, there's money appropriated for several projects. And as we discussed during the Finance Committee meeting, some of those projects that are already underway are coming in significantly under the initial estimates. Therefore, there should be money already appropriated and not earmarked that would be available for this kind of project.
Given that it's an appropriation, should we have to pass a different contract, or can it just be spent out of what's appropriated?
It could be just spent out of what is already appropriated.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thompson and then Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I'm not sure who this question goes to, and I don't want it to reflect on you all. But is this something that typically the city should put out for a bid? It's the first we've seen it. It's the first I've heard of it. And I've got somebody ready to do the work, but I don't know the process that was followed in order to identify or how that works. I don't know if that's for law director to answer or for anybody else, but just curious.
I'm going to ask Mr. Gary if you could speak to the process of collecting bids versus entertaining what's in front of us.
I don't believe that this is that this needs to be bid. It's professional services, and it's frankly on a fairly emergent basis. I mean, this didn't happen years ago.
Right.
Or let's put it this way, it doesn't look like it happened years ago. I don't think that the bid process lends itself to what the urgency that's necessary here.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. To me, I understand why we might want to wait, because it is unfortunate that again we got something literally right before the council meeting, even though it obviously there was stuff known about this before. The letter's dated May 13th. I don't know how far back the city had information on this. I just wish I would have heard about this earlier. However, it does seem like something that needs to get done quickly, and it does seem like there is, especially with the sewer easement being there, it would be good to ensure that, just to ensure that we can learn as much as we can as soon as possible. So I would be supporting tonight to move forward with this.
Mr. Thompson and then Mrs. Hanrahan.
I just have one more question. I'm looking at this, at the map provided.
What pages? Does it have a page number?
Page 4.
Okay, thanks.
If somebody, it's very hard for me to read, but I believe it says that this property, wait here, I'm going to come up because I want to make sure I'm looking at the right spot. Is this where the pipe is?
That's where the easement is.
Okay. And I assume that the landslide is in this area.
More or less, probably right here.
Okay.
And then the football comes down.
Down here. Okay. The reason I bring it up, and I just want to do this in complete transparency, is it's listing the property owner there as being Thomas Williams.
Junior.
Huh?
Thomas Williams Jr.
Thomas Williams Jr., I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, but it's...
But in the interest of transparency, it's a relative of the mayor, and we're being asked to approve at spur of the moment a price that includes that. I'm not saying that there's anything nefarious going on. I just want to point that out, that it's a piece of land owned by a relative of an elected official, and so I think deserves a little extra scrutiny.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Hanrahan?
Thank you, Madam President. Actually, I was looking at that before, and it says that the 2510 Highland Avenue is SVB LLC. Is that Mayor Williams?
I don't know.
There are 4 properties involved with this project. 1 on Highland, which I think is commercial, and 3 residential, which are on Mountain View. Is that what you've seen?
Certainly the 2507, which is the Costanzo property. Mm-hmm. There's 2503, which I believe is Brinkmeyer. Mm-hmm. There's the 2510 Highland Avenue, which is the commercial property. The Thomas Williams property at 2509 is adjacent to the easement. I don't believe the easement's on the property, but I really don't know if the landslide is on that. So it's tough to tell out there, but I do believe some of the borings would probably be in that.
No. My understanding is that land behind the swimming pool,
Yes.
that's where we're talking about the Williams that owns it. And he also, I think, lives next door. But I think the reason that land was is not owned by Costanza.
Behind the swimming pool.
Yeah, I think that the Williamses, if I'm not mistaken, purchased that property behind there when it,
Oh,
that's my
going down the hill.
understanding, going down the
Yes,
hill.
Yes, for sure.
So I don't think it's his home, it's
Right, but
behind the
it's
Costanza property.
I just was reading and was like,
Yeah.
it says it. So.
Yeah, I didn't really go in with my surveyor. I can't do that tomorrow. I'll find out. It looks like the Williams own the property all the way up to that line that runs east-west. The same common property as the 2510 Highland Avenue. And I believe the Costanza owns back to that. Now, where that slide is relative, it's probably
Yeah, I'm not
gets into, it might get into that property.
May just get into the edge of that property.
The edge of which one?
The Williams
Williams.
property.
Thank you for
So
bringing
I'm
that
saying,
up. I thought I checked it.
They're all on there. None of the borings
this
are on there.
Yeah, none of the borings will be in the Williams property.
This is Costanza, this is Brickmeyer, and Tom Williams is here, and he purchased
Who goes this? I see.
because this was available.
All right, so this is where we're.
And so Williams likes
Can you show me on this drawing?
closely with.
Yep.
If he wants to speak. Okay. I didn't see him.
And couldn't find it. Thank you.
Point of order or take a break or something here, I think.
There's Mr. Sanker.
I'm just saying, either we take a break or have a point of order to discuss this stuff, you know.
Would you like to
kinda
make a
going
motion
off
to
on
take a
random.
break?
No, I mean, if we're gonna move forward, let's move. But I mean, we're getting all these sidebars going on, and I just think it's not appropriate as far as the regular rules, so.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. So I believe everyone who was looking, I know for myself, my map is now updated on where these things are. If there is a motion to take a break, anyone feel it?
Yes, I'd like to do a motion to take a break.
Mrs. Hanrahan, motion to take a break. Is there a second? Mr. Bonsall? Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Monzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All right. Motion to take a break. We'll take a 5-minute break. All right, we are back from our break, and I've been made aware that one of the property owners has come to the meeting because we've had questions about what the property looks like and the impact on residents. I'd like to invite him up. If you could please come up and share your name and your residence and help us understand from your point of view what is happening at your property.
My name is Larry Brickmeyer. I'm the resident at 2503 Mountview Drive. I have lived there for 34 years now. I'm also an employee of the city of Norwood. I work for the Norwood Building Department. And I didn't know this was going to be discussed at tonight's meeting, or I might have dressed a little bit better and I wouldn't be so sweaty right now, because I got a phone call from my wife who's out in Harrison saying they're talking about the backyard. So my son flipped on YouTube real fast, and I threw on some clothes and ran down here to see if I could, give you my opinion and tell you what's been going on for 34 years up there with this sewer line. Like I said, I've been there for 34 years, and I know for sure it's been at least 5 times that this sewer line has been replaced between my yard and my neighbor's yard. Over time, there's been some, it's usually about springtime, because I guess that's because when the rains start coming. And we've had some sinkholes, probably half the size of this desk up here in the backyard, where I've put plywood over so nobody would fall in. And, kid, dogs, anybody, they would have fell in there, injury, and, God forbid, anybody dying or anything like that. But this has gone on for 34 years. This latest episode that you're talking about now happened in February, and it looked like an earthquake hit my neighbor's backyard, Tina, and came from her backyard. There's a fence there, came under the fence. I just put a patio and wall in about 3 years ago. Came up along my patio, made a right turn, went behind my wall and my deck back there, went all along the wall, and came back out the other side of the wall, over the backyard, and went back down over the hill. And I think there's on the right side between my patio and my neighbor's fence, there's probably 2 more of these, what do you guys call those?
Head scars.
Well, I'm sorry?
Head scars.
There's 2 or 3 of these head scars, and they look like there was an earthquake there. And some of them are pretty wide, some are bigger than the other. And the patio that I put in 3 years ago is practically destroyed now. I heard you guys say that something about Tommy Williams owns some of his property. Yeah, he does. He owns the hillside behind my neighbor's Tina's, and he owns from the top of the hill all the way down, I'm guessing, to Highland Avenue. This property used to belong to Perry and Derrick, and they bought, I think Tom and his dad, Mayor Williams, bought this property so there couldn't be any development coming up the hillside. And that's the reason they own that back hill. They don't own actually any of the easement. It's more the hillside. The easement runs between myself and my neighbor's teenage yard. The last time this sewer pipe broke, it was probably about 4 years ago. And they replaced it from the sewer pipe, probably about, that sewer pipe that's there goes from the sewer that's on the street about halfway in our yard, and then it continues further down over the hill. But they never connected it into the manhole that's down over the hill, because that manhole that's down over the hill, it went into a cavern. It was brick, and that brick is just disintegrated. So they just let it run open over the hillside. Well, one time there was just a little cavern where that water ran, and now it's a big gully. It's pretty wide and it's pretty deep. If it got filled with water, again, if a child got in there, they could easily drown. If an animal got in there, same thing. They're not, people have, our neighborhood now is full of animal, dogs and all kinds of other pets. But my neighbor spoke with the safety search director, Joe Gears, back in March, and he had people come up and look at it. Have you guys been there a couple times, I'm guessing?
I've been there once.
Okay, yourself. I know Joe has had people up there, and my neighbor's been a little bit more adamant than me in getting things taken care of. But my personal feelings is if the sooner something can get done, the better, because I'd rather not have a Highland Avenue address. I like Mountain View Avenue. I'd like to stay on Mountain View for another 30 years. But I'm not asking the city to do this, do that. If you know, I'm not going to sue the city. I'm not that type of person. But if something can be done, and if something can be done rather sooner than later, because we've had a lot of rain. I don't know what this summer's calling about for rain, but it seems like every time it rains in Norwood, it's usually inches instead of half inch or something like that. But I'm glad you guys are taking the time out to talk about this. If anybody ever wants to come up there, I'll be more than happy to show you around. I'll take you down in the woods, wear your boots because it's really muddy down there. But I'll be more than happy to show you, and I'm sure my neighbor Tina should be more. She just had in the fall around her swimming pool, she had stonework done. Well, that stonework has completely been busted up since the fall from the movement. There's gullies over there. She has a fence. It used to kind of run like this. Now it kind of runs like this, and that's they've tried to put boards to hold it up from falling completely apart. But I don't know what kind of price they're throwing on this, but I'm sure it's not cheap. No. But if anybody ever wants to come up to my house, I'll be more than willing to show you. But don't come Thursday through Sunday because I will not be in town. But again, thank you again for letting me speak.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for talking about this situation, because I think it needs to be taken care of sooner than later. Okay. If you have any questions, I'll answer any questions you might have.
I think you did a good job.
All right. Thank you, people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the consultants? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, I did have a question. So there's also been some landslides that have happened, or landslides that have happened at one of the city parks at Upper Millcrest or Lower Millcrest. Have either of you been involved in any looking at that, or has there been any direction, like any ask of the city for you all to look into that by chance?
I have not looked at Millcrest.
Okay, no worries. Okay, and then I had a question for if I don't mind.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So I just had a question for the assistant law director who's kindly here tonight. What is the justification, or at least is it your recommendation that we move forward with trying to, with the evaluation?
Yes, it is my recommendation. The recommendation is based in part upon my understanding that there's a 15-foot public sewer easement that runs down that hillside, and that this landslide may well be related to that easement. Now, if what the geotech people are saying is it's unrelated to the easement, I'd say no, it's not the city's responsibility. But if it appears to be related, and then I would say the city ought to be investigating it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
So this was communication number 4, which we considered right after the passage of the minutes. Is there a motion? Yes, thank you.
So, are you
Mr.
looking
Bonsall?
for? Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Are you looking for a motion to approve the letter? Is that what you're asking?
Whatever you'd like to do.
Is that where? Yeah. So I will move to approve the letter.
Mr. Syker?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
To approve the expenditure.
So I do want to make sure I'm clear on that. Thank you. The letter says, as Mr. Sinker pointed out earlier, the second sentence, I am asking for approval of the expenditure so that the consultants can move forward. The expenditure being between $21,000 and $25,000. So it's my understanding, I'm going to direct this to our assistant law director. If we receive and file the letter, we are in fact approving the expense.
I think you can receive and file the letter without approving the expenditure, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I think we have in the past done that. We've received and filed a letter and then considered an expense or another action separately. I think Mr. Bonds, I heard you motion and Mr. Stanker motion just to receive and file.
Yes, receive and file is the thing. I had a point of clarity or question.
Sure, Mr. Mansell.
Thank you so much. I guess this would be to the city auditor or to the assistant law director through the chair. Does council need to approve this expenditure, or could the city administration, through the appropriations that have already been passed, make the expenditure without our approval?
I think this may be even an emergent matter that the city could spend or could expend the money without the council's approval. I think the effort is to inform the council and to try to get approval from the council for this expenditure, rather than just spend it and then say, what happened here?
Thank you, Mr. Gary. Mr. Smith, did you have a response? Do you want to add anything?
No, that's good.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor is to receive and file. Any other discussion? So as it stands, that motion is not approving the expense as well. It's just receiving and filing. Mr. Sinker?
However, I believe Mr. Gary said that they can proceed with it as an emergency basis anyway, so don't be surprised if that's what happens.
Correct. So the expense can be approved by the administration. Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All present voted yes to passes.
Just let it proceed.
Yes. Back to that agenda. We do have a request to address council on an agenda item. I spoke with Ms. Worley during our break, and she has agreed to address us when we consider the third reading of the ordinance, which she is here to speak on. So at this time, we'll go to the next agenda item H, which is reports of standing committees of council, beginning with the Housing, Health, and Public Safety.
Thank you. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Housing, Health, and Public Safety, to whom was referred Building Department fees, beg leave to submit the following report. There was discussion concerning fee increases suggested by the Building Department. We will be recommending no fee increase for residential fees, and that's to encourage residents to improve their properties. Commercial fees and set fee recommendations will be discussed at our next meeting. Commercial and set fee increases that are being considered are to cover the building inspector's costs. Respectfully submitted, Marilyn Hanrahan, Chairperson, John Breeden, Andrew Clark, Joe Sanker.
Mr. Clark?
Move that the committee report be accepted.
Mr. Braden, I think I saw you. Second
I'll
that?
second that.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
We have a report from Finance, Budget, and Audit. Mr. Bonson.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So, to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Finance, Budget, and Audit, to whom is referred Capital Improvements Plan and City Finances, beg leave to submit the following report. We will bring the Capital Improvements Plan to Council to review on June 11th. We also heard from the Auditor regarding the tax budget, the Then and Now Ordinance, eGov upgrade, and appropriations changes. Respectfully submitted, James Bonsall, Chairperson, Andrew Clark, John Braden, Leslie Stevenson.
Mr. Clark?
Move that the committee report be accepted.
I think I saw Mr. Thompson's hand. Are you seconding that motion? Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
Moving on to the third reading of ordinances. I'd like to ask Ms. Penny Worley to come up as we consider the ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to sell surplus real property by internet auction and to enter into an exclusive right to sell agreement with Keller Williams Pinnacle Group to conduct the auction during calendar year 2019 and declaring an emergency. Hello, welcome back. If you would please describe your services and how
What I do.
yes, how you do what you do.
Okay. My name is Penny Worley, and I have had an auction company locally for 26 years here in the greater Cincinnati area. I've conducted auctions in over 33 states. Last week I was in New Orleans conducting an auction for a multi-billion-dollar bank. So what I do is turn assets into cash. I am also a licensed realtor, licensed auctioneer, and a certified appraiser. So I did a proposal about a year and a half ago for you guys. You had me here. And the proposal was to sell approximately 16 properties or so. And so my proposal included the plan to do that. Today I sell everything online only. I don't do live auctions anymore unless it's a benefit or a ballroom setting. I've done every kind of auctions you can imagine, from multi-state real estate auctions, farms, city properties. I also do a fair amount of personal property. I just did Palomino Restaurant downtown. I auctioned off the Covington Landing. I sold the barge. I sold the restaurant equipment. Everything at auction. So that's what I do. I'm an auctioneer. So do you want me to kind of answer questions from here, or?
If are there questions? Mr. Sanker?
If possibly, if any of you could maybe go through your process for
Plan.
real estate properties, or what typically is your process from start to finish, and recommendations on how to handle that.
That's so easy. That's an easy question to answer. So basically, if you contract me to sell these city properties, we enter into a listing agreement. Again, I am a real estate agent. In the state of Ohio, you cannot auction real estate unless you're both an auctioneer and a realtor. So years ago, auctioneers got together with the Board of Realtors in Greater Cincinnati and talked to them about having the option to show auction properties within the MLS. So today, when you look at properties in the MLS, you can actually see if it's an auction property or not. But basically, having a real estate auction is an accelerated marketing program, and we run those for 30 to 40 days. So from the time that the properties are listed until they are sold is 30 to 40 days. The process would be getting all of the listings together after we've signed the contract, signage, marketing, and as soon as all the descriptions are made of these properties, they hit our website and are open for bidding for at least 30 days. This is a scientific time frame that I've developed personally, that I like those properties in the cooker, so to speak, on my website for 30 days. That allows us to do a good amount of marketing. And what type of marketing would be the next question. I did put that in my proposal. So since we're pretty much internet based, a good majority is going to be Facebook campaigns, search engine optimization. Of course, it's listed in the MLS. I'm also a member of RIA, which is the Real Estate Investment Association of Greater Cincinnati. I'm selling a residential home in Liberty Township right now, and I can't believe the people coming from RIA. So that's where all the investors go. And looking at your portfolio, we need those investors to bid the properties up. The market is super hot right now, so this is a great time to sell. I think things are bringing stupid money. So an auction is basically a way to accelerate the value because it's worth what someone's willing to pay for it rather than setting a ceiling or a price. You're allowing people to competitive bid. So the bidding goes on for 30 days. Everything on my website starts at $1 and it goes from there. I have lots of examples. Give you one example. Last year I sold a little over 100 acres in Kentucky, and I do sell in other states. It was near the Kentucky Speedway, and this was a repeat client of mine. We needed to get a certain amount for the property, and we ran it for 30 days. It had a nice little 2-bedroom cabin, a tobacco barn, shooting range, a little pond. It was a great retreat near the Kentucky Speedway. The bidding went on for 30 days, and we did have a specific reserve because they did owe the bank, and so they were quite worried, is this going to meet our payoff? The day that the bidding ended, the crescendo, so to speak, I got a call from the owner of Cervati's saying that they lost their bid number with me. Well, I've sold lots of bakeries and restaurants around town, so that's how I acquired this great bidder. And it had been a while since he bid on restaurant equipment, but he was looking to buy land now. And long story short, they bought the property sight unseen, closed in 2 weeks, and paid $490,000 for it. So we sell a wide range of properties. I also am under contract with the FDIC and have been for 11 years. So I work for the federal government. I have federal clearance. I work with banks to turn assets into cash. So I have a wide variety of clientele, from individual estates to local restaurants, you name it. I've sold quite a bit in the 26 years. So as far as, Joe, as far as kind of explaining the process, did I leave any holes in that process that you can think of? Like start to finish?
I did have a question about how the listing gets developed. So I know this is all online. When you actually are making that Facebook post or writing that web page, how does that content get created?
I think one of the council's concerns is marketing, and we can collaborate. In some clients that I have, especially the government or banks, they like to see the verbiage beforehand. It gets approved. We can collaborate. Understand that an auction is basically a marketing process. That's what we do. We're really marketing people with accelerated bidding. So we can collaborate on what the message is, the theme of it. That's all created before it hits basically the bidding. We have the marketing pretty much laid out. And since you have multiple properties, we also would do signage throughout that. It gets pushed out to our 30,000 plus bidders. That's part of the marketing. We do weekly email blasts to our bidder base. And again, the message, the heading of that is important, like the theme or what you'd like it to say. Again, we can collaborate on that. You can approve it. I can push that over and say, here are the postcards we're going to send, and this is what it's going to say. As far as postcards, we typically will hit demographically the zip code, maybe target specific businesses and residences, people that we think might be interested in buying the properties. Even neighbors, etc. I know you have some adjoining property owners that might be interested as well.
That's great. Thank you. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. So I have just a specific question about the increments. I have a friend that was bidding on some tool chest or something on your website a couple of weeks ago, and so the bidding went up from it was 60, and then to 70, and then to 80. And then once it got to 100, the increments automatically switched to 50. And so there was, whoever other person bid 100, and this person was not willing to bid 150, but they would have been willing to bid 110 or 120. So who sets these increments? And then another specific example is I was bidding on a property on Carter on auction.com, and until at the last day or the last 3 or 4 hours, the increments switched from thousands to or it was every 5,000, so it was up to 120,000, and then it switched to hundreds, and then all of a sudden people were bidding and bidding and bidding, and the thing went on for an hour after the close date because it kept extending. So the increments I'm asking about, then does your thing keep extending if people are bidding at the very end?
So extended bidding and increments are two different things.
Yes.
So as far as the increments, we set those, it's based on dollar value. Your increment at $1,000 is certainly not going to be the same when you're at 100. So at a live auction, you'd be like, 100 now, able to get 125, and now able to get 150, and now 175, able to get 200, 200 now, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 275. So that's how you're in $25 bids. When you're in hundreds, when you get to 1,000, maybe 100. But certainly if somebody was bidding 50,000, you would never cut their bid at $100. They would stay within the fair increments that have already been established. They would have to bid fair and square. So it's already set within the software. It's not like somebody's in there manually changing it or have, superior knowledge. So basically, if we're getting close, I may go into my project manager and say, let's just move the increments to 1,000 because we don't want to lose out, but we certainly wouldn't make it unfair for bidding. It stays within the dollar amount, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. And then what about at the very end? Like, can people
Extended
just
bidding.
Can they
Yes.
just swoop in at the very end and then?
They can't swoop in like Snipeware. Like with eBay, if there's a 2 o'clock close time, it's a dead close. Everything closes at 2 o'clock. If you have 16 properties, we can set the software to close one property every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes. So that basically is a staggered closing. But with anything that we sell on our Whirly website, there is extended bidding. There'll be a time clock next to each property that says when it's due to close. So let's just say it's 1 o'clock, 1:15, 1:30, 1:45, 2 o'clock. One property every 15 minutes. If someone places a bid in the last 5 minutes that anything is due to close on our website, it will then extend the bidding for another 5 minutes. And the reason that I have that software is it emulates a live auction. So if I'm standing up here and I'm calling for bids, I'm not going to drop the hammer if somebody raises their hand. You would lose money that way. That keeps it competitive. If no one else bids again with the next 5 minutes, then it closes.
Okay.
So it makes it fair, so Snipeware does not work on this software.
Any other questions? Mr. Syker?
Yes, what's your time frame as far as once we decide about moving forward and these are the properties, potentially we pass this tonight, then where do we go from there? Then are we looking at July, August timeframe, or?
Let's just say you decide within a week, and we're in mid-May, we could have them sold by the end of June. And then the buyer has to close within 30 days. I would also like, wherever we're at in, I was told you couldn't do absolute, there would be like reserves, so I would want to know those up front, and then that would have to be finalized within 24 hours of the bidding. So let's say bidding closed at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, then we would have 24 hours for me to be able to go back and tell everyone, yes, 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 no, I need this, whatever. I'm fully confident that the properties, regardless of what they are, whether it's a speck of dirt or a house or whatever it is, it's going to bring top dollar based on the market today. Last year, and I didn't have this in my proposal, last year I sold about the same amount of properties in Price Hill and Lower Price Hill for an estate. It was court ordered, and it was ordered to go absolute. There were 5 heirs, 3 wanted to cash out of the estate. The other 2 gentlemen fancied themselves running their dad's rental properties, and they had an expectation of about $150,000 for these 16 properties. And again, some of them were just a hillside, maybe not even billable. Maybe they needed engineering just to build something on it. Some of the properties were not even habitable. The auction did $440,000. I, in my wildest dreams, didn't expect that. So based on where we're at in the market, there's a lack of inventory. There's a lot of spirited investors out there. And if you did have this, theme of, improving and building Norwood, this would fit and people would be, dying to have any property, and competitive bidding would make it very spirited.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very
Thank you so much.
Yep.
And if you need anything else from me, please don't hesitate to reach out and I can shoot over whatever you need. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Ms. Worley, speaking ahead of our consideration of the third reading of the ordinance, number 1. Mr. Clark?
Just my third reminder that I will be abstaining because of my full-time job at the Board of Realtors.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Move we would have the third reading of the ordinance.
I will second that. Discussion?
No, I'll second. What were you looking for? Were you looking for a second?
I seconded.
Oh.
Yes, sorry, I may not have been loud enough. I seconded the motion to have the third reading. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Abstain.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
Ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to sell surplus real property by internet auction and to enter into an exclusive right to sell agreement with Keller Williams Pinnacle Group to conduct the auction during calendar year 2019 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. I would move that we pass the ordinance.
Seconded by Mrs. Hanahan. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Abstain.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
By a vote of 6 yeas and 1 abstention, it passes. We move on to the second readings of ordinances. We're going to have the ordinance enacting, Chapter 556, the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Scooter, Bicycles, and Remote Vehicle Rental Businesses. Mr. Thompson?
I would move we have the second reading of the ordinance.
Mr. Clark? Is that a second?
Yes.
All right, any discussion? Mrs. Hanahan?
There were quite a few questions last meeting about this ordinance, and I've gotten some of the answers for you. And I'm ready to discuss these bikes. First, I'm going to start out just by saying that I have received a letter just today from the Norwood Vet Center up on Montgomery Road, addressing their concerns with the bikes and scooters on Montgomery Road and the impact on their clients. And I will share that at our committee meeting when we talk about that. I have spoken with Lime Bike Representative Sherry Shapiro in the past. She at that time would not agree to meet with me without dictating who attended the meeting. She also indicated their company should approve the fees for the illegally parked scooters and bikes. All I can say is Bird Bike representatives have been much more cooperative than Lime. After our last council meeting, there were so many questions. I again contacted Lime, and I contacted another member of that company. Miss Shapiro did send me a message then agreeing to attend the Housing, Health, and Safety Committee meeting. Mr. Hanlon from Xavier University has also agreed. He's been asked because Xavier is the one that has the contract with Lime Bike. I intend to schedule this meeting sometime in June. The last meeting, parking bikes and scooters were discussed. And according to another representative at Xavier, Mr. Fall, he stated that they are to be parked on the sidewalk. He is now telling me that Lime will not remove the bikes or scooters at night unless they need charging. So they're going to stay out all night regardless. The ordinance we're looking at right now tonight that I'm hoping to get passed is not about the agreement with the scooter companies. It's about the safety of our citizens due to these bikes and scooters being parked or dropped in the middle of the sidewalk and streets. Many of you live in other areas of Norwood, but in South Norwood, they are a major safety concern and our residents are complaining. I feel this ordinance need to be passed now to protect those at risk, including would-be individuals walking, those on mobile devices, pushing strollers, or walking a dog. These illegally parked scooters are an invitation for serious injury. And the fact that they're not picked up at night, since many of our streets are very dark, it's just a matter of time before someone gets hurt. So I am asking again for people to go ahead and do the second reading on this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanrahan. Any other discussion? Motion is to have the second read. Call a roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes.
Motion passes. Please have the reading.
Ordinance enacting Chapter 556 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Scooters, Bicycles, and Remote Vehicle Rental Businesses.
There are no second and third readings of resolutions. We do have several introductory readings of ordinances. We'll start with the first. If there's Mr. Bonsall.
Okay, so I will move to have the first reading of the ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2019 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you.
Sorry, actually, can I rephrase that? I'd like
Yeah.
to move to have the first, second, and third readings of that ordinance.
I saw, okay, Mr. Clark, is that a second?
I'll second.
All right. The motion is to suspend the rules and have all three. Call a roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I move that the ordinance be passed.
We didn't have.
I
We
had to read.
didn't have.
discussion.
Yes, please.
All right. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2019 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2019 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2019 and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I would move that the ordinance be passed.
Mr. Clark.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you. I'd like to ask for explanations on the changes, please.
We have our auditor here. Would you please address that?
Yes, Madam President Pro Tem. There's a few changes. The biggest change on here, or the one that really changes what the appropriations are, is the one for the recreation key. When we were transferring the fiscal emergency plan into changes for appropriations, there should have been a reduction for materials and supplies key for $10,300 for recreation over what the initial appropriations were at the beginning of the year to match the plan. In the transposing of all of those keys, in the document that was produced, instead of it saying 0110507300, it said 0110508801, which put it into the refund key. So as appropriations are right now, the refund key is negative $10,300, and the materials and supplies key, which is the one just above it, it has an extra $10,300 in it. So we need to increase the one that's negative and decrease the other one, and that's a net zero effect, but it corrects that misalignment of the cells that created that document. The other issue is for increasing is the Homeland Security Norwood Fund 25, increasing $12,566. That is to match the certificate of estimated resources. When you look at the fund beginning balance and the projected or actual revenue to this point, that is the amount that it needs to be increased to match that amount. So the cash is in the fund, we need to appropriate it so it can be spent by the police department. The state highway fund decreasing $5,570. That's one of the funds that's in fiscal emergency plan, and it listed, I believe, at $74,000 at the beginning of the year. In the plan, they include, on a cash basis, any encumbrances from the previous year. So while the plan says it should be $74,000, the actual amount on the certificate is $5,570 less, because that's the amount of open purchase orders there were at the end of 2018. So we don't want to appropriate that amount because that's already encumbered. So we're just decreasing that to match what the certificate amount is for revenue and cash carryover, because we're subtracting off those open POs, where the fiscal emergency plan includes those open POs, because that's on a cash basis, not on a accrual basis. The big one that's on here is earnings tax contractual, $1,750,000. That is Fund 89. So Fund 89 is a fund that tracks earnings tax revenue for 4 major companies in the city. The agreement, the contract that the city has with those companies is that 50% of their earnings tax coming into the city, mostly corporate tax, is split off into a separate fund in Fund 89. So we don't put that in the general fund on our appropriations or on our revenue projections, because that's the agreement that we have with those companies, except for the fact that the Fiscal Emergency Commission and the state auditors want all of that money lumped in. So last year, whenever you looked at the revenues, or when you look at revenue reports from our treasurer, it always includes that money that's going off to Fund 89. But from a budgetary standpoint, we should not be appropriating that money because it does not go to the general fund. So when we took the fiscal emergency plan totals and converted them into appropriations, there's going to be a mismatch between what the plan says the earnings tax office should have for their contractual and what our appropriation should be, that is equal to the amount of the revenue for Fund 89 in a given year. And the projections for that fund, the projections for that revenue that's coming in, that 50% from those 4 companies, is $1,750,000. So that's already appropriated over Fund 89. But what we need to do is take it off of our appropriations, but then that will mismatch. They will not be equal to the fiscal emergency plan by that $1.75 million. So I went over this today with the, and the reason that that was not in the copy that I had given to you for your packets on Friday was this was still being discussed with the Auditor of State. I wanted to make sure that they were good with all these changes and that they wanted it done this way, which is the way that it really should be done, because I think we should only be appropriating, and we should only show in our revenue projections the money we can actually spend, the money that we can actually use. So that's a little bit different than the plan. The plan adds the revenue in the top of 1.7 million and then has an extra 1.7 million in expense under the earnings tax key. I think our appropriation should reflect what we actually spend out of that, which is that decrease of $1,750,000. I can answer any questions if you like.
Any other questions? I believe the motion on the floor was to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings, which passed. Oh, I'm sorry, which we did. And now, is there?
Yes. Mr. Bronson.
Oh, Mr. Clark, thank you. That's why this says 2 on my paper. Good team. Did you call the roll, please?
Mr. Montal?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes.
All right, all present voting yes, it passes. I want to say thank you all for your patience. You would think, being an attendee of this meeting, makes it a lot easier to transition. It doesn't. You kind of have to do multiple things. So thank you for your patience. It's already been a late evening. So when we made the amendments to the agenda, we inserted in between the 1 and 2 ordinance on your paper the resolutions that were provided. And just a reminder of that order, it's the resolution approving the petition to be considered next, followed by the resolution approving the necessity considered next. And then the ordinances would remain in the order they are in on your agenda. So we are still in the introductory readings of we are into the introductory readings of resolutions, sorry. Mr. Boswell.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So I move that we have the first reading of the resolution approving the petition for special assessments for special energy improvement projects and plan for public improvements and declaring an emergency. Do we need, and a point of clarity here too, do we need all 3 readings tonight, or is
So I will definitely address that. So I received communication from the law department, and I'll ask Mr. Gary to maybe expound if needed. In order for the project to move forward, this is what I believe it was Mr. Brown shared about at our last regular meeting. The resolutions and the ordinances have to be passed at the same time in this order for the process to move forward. We received the petition and the supplement plan as the attachments. Mr. Gary, am I leaving anything out in terms of how this gets considered?
My understanding is that this does not require any expenditure by the city, and that this is a way for private property owner to enhance the value of its property using energy savings type improvements. And I'm sure that they'd like to proceed as quickly as they can. Joshua Hersner is here in the gallery to address any questions that the council may have about this. My understanding is that this is for the property at 4643 Forest Avenue, which I believe is the Encore's Technology property. It's the former MedPace building, and Encore Technologies wants to invest a bunch of money in their energy improvements and do it in this way, which is of benefit to the company and no detriment to the city. Did I answer the question?
I think so. I do also see here a note from the law director. He had previously addressed members of council via email saying that the parties involved would really like if we passed all of this today.
Okay, so I'll amend my motion to have all 3 readings.
Okay, Mr. Clark?
I'll second that.
So the motion is to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the resolution approving the petition. Any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, it passes. Please have the readings.
A resolution approving the petition for special assessments for special energy improvement projects and plan for public improvements and declaring an emergency. A resolution approving the petition for special assessments for special energy improvement projects and plan for public improvements and declaring an emergency. A resolution approving the petition for special assessments for special energy improvement projects and plan for public improvements and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Clark?
Move that the resolution be passed.
Mrs. Hanrahan, second. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, it passes. Mr. Clark?
For the next resolution, I move that we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of that resolution.
Mrs. Hanrahan, second.
Yes.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan,
Yes.
Mr. Sanker,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All present, it passes. Please have the readings.
A resolution approving the necessity of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Norwood, Ohio, in cooperation with the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency. A resolution approving the necessity of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the City of Norwood, Ohio, in cooperation with the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency. A resolution approving the necessity of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the City of Norwood, Ohio, in cooperation with the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Saker?
I'd recommend that the resolution be passed.
Mr. Braden, second that.
I second that.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, the motion passes. We are back into considering ordinances. Introductory readings of ordinances. Number 3 is where we're at on the agenda. Mr. Sanker?
Madam President, I would like to have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Seconded by Mr. Clark. Any discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, could there just be some clarity of the type? Like, which is this the one that's an ordinance levying special assessments, or is it an ordinance determining to proceed?
Determining.
I apologize. Thank you for that question. I misspoke. I said number 3. We are actually at a point in time when we need to consider what is written as number 2, an ordinance determining to proceed with the acquisition, construction, and improvement of certain public improvements.
But
Mr. Sanker?
when she was referring to number 3, it was in the order that they need to be passed, so that everything is coordinated properly for the state.
Okay,
So-
as long as we just have clarity. I mean, I just want to make sure we have clarity for the minutes and for what we're voting on, so that's fine.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, it is ordinance number 2, but on the letter from the law director recommending the order to proceed, it's number 3 on that letter from the law director. But,
Correct. So, Mr. Sanker, to confirm, is your motion that we suspend the rules and have a reading of an ordinance determining to proceed?
Yes, Madam President, determining to proceed with the acquisition, correct?
Okay. And Mr. Clark, is that your second?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Both for the clarity. Any other discussion? Okay. Call a roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, please have the readings.
An ordinance determining to proceed with the acquisition, construction, and improvement of certain public improvements in the City of Norwood, Ohio, in cooperation with the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency. An ordinance determining to proceed with the acquisition, construction, and improvement of certain public improvements in the City of Norwood, Ohio, in cooperation with the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency. An ordinance determining to proceed with the acquisition, construction, and improvement of certain public improvements in the City of Norwood, Ohio, in cooperation with the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Sanker,
I recommend the ordinance be passed, please.
seconded by Mrs. Hanrahan. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, it passes. The next item on the agenda for consideration says numeral 3, an ordinance levying special assessments for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Norwood in cooperation with the Norwood Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Mr. Sanker, second.
Yes, Madam President.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, the motion passes. Please have the readings.
An ordinance levying special assessments for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Norwood in cooperation with the Norwood Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency. An ordinance levying special assessments for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Norwood in cooperation with the Norwood Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency. An ordinance levying special assessments for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Norwood in cooperation with the Norwood Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Clark.
Move that the ordinance be passed.
Mr. Sanker, second.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor? The ordinance passes. The next item on the agenda is numeral 4. Mr. Sanker?
Madam President, I'd recommend that we have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Seconded by Mr. Breeden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Breeden.
Yes, sir.
Please have the readings.
An ordinance authorizing and approving an energy project cooperative agreement by and among the City of Norwood, Ohio, Energy Special Improvement District, 4620 Wesley LLC, and Inland Green Trust, providing for the financing of a special energy improvement project in the city, authorizing and improving a special assessment agreement by and between the city, the county treasurer, 4620 Wesley LLC, and the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District, authorizing and approving related agreements and declaring an emergency. An ordinance authorizing and approving an energy project cooperative agreement by and among the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District, 4620 Wesley LLC, and Inland Green Trust, providing for the financing of a special energy improvement project in the city, authorizing and approving a special assessment agreement by and between the city, the county treasurer, 4620 Wesley LLC, and the City of Norwood, Ohio Special Energy Improvement District, authorizing and approving related agreements and declaring an emergency. An ordinance authorizing and approving an energy project cooperative agreement by and among the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District, 4620 Wesley LLC, and Inland Green Trust, providing for the financing of a special energy improvement project in the city, authorizing and approving a special assessment agreement by and between the city, the county treasurer, 4620 Wesley LLC, and the City of Norwood, Ohio Energy Special Improvement District, authorizing and approving related agreements and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Sanker?
Madam President, I would recommend that the ordinance be passed.
Mrs. Hanahan? Second?
Yes.
Any discussion? Mr. Sanker?
Yes, Madam President, I would like to commend the owners for this aggressive project they're undertaking. to improve the energy efficiency of their building and facility, and sure hope it pays off dividends long term for them, and that they're around to see this commence as well. So, but thank you.
Any other discussion? The motion is to pass. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, the motion passes. We had amended the agenda so that we added 2 ordinances. The next in consideration is the ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement to purchase eGov computer specialized accounting software and to enter an agreement to provide for training and declaring an emergency. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Since we already provided for this or planned for it in the financial recovery plan and had discussions about it then, I would move that we have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Mr. Clark, second.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes.
Just so you know, I always contact the financial supervisors and they approve this today. They are aware of it and it's in the financial recovery plan and they did approve the ordinance passage tonight, just so you know.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Only till tomorrow.
So the motion is to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, the motion passes. Please have the readings.
Ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement to purchase eGov computer specialized accounting software and to enter an agreement to provide for training and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement to purchase eGov computer specialized accounting software and to enter an agreement to provide for training and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement to purchase eGov computer specialized accounting software and to enter an agreement to provide for training and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Clark,
Move that the ordinance be passed.
seconded by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Sanker?
Yes, Madam President. Question through the chair to the auditor. As far as the training for city officials and employees from Software Solutions, will there will be set schedule set for training for the employees, or is it just happenstance who wants to be trained and who doesn't?
Yes, Madam President. Yes, actually, their way of setting this up and training people is pretty well established. And what we're looking at doing is over a 3 to 6 month period, they would set up and create what they call a playground, which is essentially a sandbox, which is a form of the accounting system modeled after ours, which is not active, but allows employees and especially people in payroll and department heads to get in and use the system and play with it and figure out how it works for several months. There will be on-site training for all employees that would be exposed to this software, and they would be expected to utilize this software, this playground that they set up, to become proficient at it before we actually go live. So there's going to be some extensive training sessions on site. There will also be some more personalized training sessions for people like the water department auditor and treasurer who will be using some more intensive areas of it. But pretty much any employee will be able to come, and we recommend that multiple employees and department heads come from each department to become proficient in using this and utilize the time frame that this playground is set up to be able to really experiment with it and become proficient in the use of it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan,
Yes.
Mr. Sanker,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, the motion passes. We have one more ordinance for tonight. This was the then and now that was added. Mr. Clark.
Thank you. I would move that we'd have all three readings of this ordinance.
Mr. Braden seconds to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Any discussion? Mr. Saker?
Just a point of clarification is what this is actually pertaining to, if you, through the chair, the auditor.
Absolutely. Mr. Steth, could you address
Yes.
what this is regarding?
Madam President Pro Tem. So Fund 81 is a Board of Building Standards fund that for every building permit issued by the City of Norwood, state law indicates that a 3% portion of those bills be collected, placed in a special fund. It's a pass-through fund, so when the money goes in, every month it should just go out to the Board of Building Standards. Now, in 2018, there was a month, and if you think back to the auditor's report for the end of 2018, remember that the building department fees were much higher last year than projected. Most of that was related to one large project, which this represents. So the 3% portion of that is over $10,000. It was $10,282.14. Not knowing that was coming in, usually the fees for that fund are $1,000 a month. And we had one that was $10,000. Well, that money wasn't appropriated because we didn't know that it was coming in, and the PO was requested and kicked back to the department, and at that point a letter goes to all department heads when purchase orders are rejected saying, you need to take this to Finance Committee and explain why you need a higher level of appropriations. Well, that didn't happen, and it kept kind of getting kicked back and forth, and now we've got a fund that has money in it. That cash is actually there. The money's appropriated this year because we appropriated that fund balance based on what the year-end balance was, so the money's appropriated, but it is a PO it is a bill from 2018. I have the ability in my office to grant a then and now certificate up to about $2,500. Well, this exceeds that. So in order to pay this bill by law, I have to have council's permission to pay a bill from last year. Although the money's been collected, it's a pass-through account, it's sitting in there, and it's appropriated and ready to be spent. We need authorization to actually issue that check. And if there should have been attached to it, the form here, if you didn't get it, I do have a copy up here we can pass around. This shows the amount that came in and the amount that goes to the state.
Thank you, Mr. Steth. Any other questions? The motion is to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan,
Yes.
Mr. Sanker,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
The motion passes. Please have the readings.
Ordinance authorizing the auditor to approve a then and now certificate for the Building Assessment Fund 81 to cover the cost of an invoice from the Ohio Board of Building Standards for 2018 for a total of $10,282.14 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the auditor to approve a then and now certificate for the Building Assessment Fund 81 to cover the cost of an invoice from the Ohio Board of Building Standards for 2018 for a total of $10,282.14 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the auditor to approve a then and now certificate for the Building Assessment Fund 81 to cover the cost of an invoice from the Ohio Board of Building Standards for 2018 for a total of $10,282.14 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Clark.
Move that the ordinance be passed.
Seconded by Mr. Bonsall. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonsall,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan,
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes, sir.
All in favor? That motion passes. Because of the changes, we are now into the administrative reports, and we do have one from the auditor.
Yes, I made a report to Finance Committee. We're going to quickly go over that now, just to bring you all up to speed. I did provide a copy of this to the Clerk of Council. If you didn't get a copy by email, the Secretary of the Clerk can send it out. I know it went to the Finance Committee members, but each member of City Council and department head should be receiving a financial monthly closeout documents generated from the auditor's office. If you're not getting these, contact Kelly Brown in my office to be added to the list. A letter has been sent to City Council requesting official recognition of receipt of these documents as recommended by the Report on Accounting Methods. In March 2019, the city approved the updated fiscal emergency plan adopted by the commission. The current appropriations have been adjusted to match the intention of the plan, and we just made those final adjustments tonight. We recommended the passage of the then and now ordinance, which we just passed. The key with that ordinance is that cash is in a fund waiting to be paid. We just needed approval for the bill. The certificate of estimated resources has been updated to reflect new revenue estimates and actual receipts. We'll be sending that to the County Budget Commission for their next hearing. The month of April closed with a general fund cash balance of $2,617,576 with an encumbered balance negative $135,968. This negative amount is due to open purchase orders. A copy of the cash position report is included in the financial monthly records which are sent to you. Overall, the general fund year-to-date revenue was $8,456,684, with earnings tax being the largest general fund revenue source year-to-date of $6,267,974, which is $89,483 below the predicted for this point of the year, although it is still very early in the year. The first half Hamilton County settlement for 2018 property tax was received and booked in April with general property tax revenue of $1,252,018 and tangible personal property tax of $123,893. Significant year-to-date revenue over April 2018 is noted in the interest earned key, which is 0100048710, and it is $43,938, which has had no revenue in the past several years prior to the end of 2018. Miscellaneous revenue is also higher this year, with a major source being refunds on real estate taxes paid to the city in previous years due to the hard work of the law department. The city has received 2 credit cards according to the policy approved by City Council. These cards are held by the fire and the health departments, and the cards are kept in the auditor's office. A first quarterly report on credit card usage will be made in July 2019 per the policy. Retirees eligible for the new retiree benefit program adopted by City Council have been sent their checks. A total of 140 retirees and spouses were each sent $3,500 check, which is reflected in the total expenditures for April. Total cost to the city was $490,000 plus mailing and costs of communication. The city continues to pay retirees' health expenses from previous years, with retirees' health care year-to-date expenses of $80,076 and C9 Trust year-to-date of $189,218. A third-party company continues to process and manage these expenses. The auditor's office has been preparing written procedures as recommended by the Report on Accounting Methods and other operational concerns. These are the first steps towards the creation of a citywide policy and procedure manual. I've attached several series of charts for revenue that's generated in the general fund. These are to be used as visual references, and these are unaudited totals. I'd like to add one other thing on that was not in the letter, is our tax budget is due at the end of June every year. And I'd like to see if we could schedule a public hearing for the tax budget at the first meeting of June, which would be June 11th meeting, I believe. If so, I will prepare the tax budget documents and have them available both online and available in my office for review 2 weeks prior to June 11th. The tax budget will match the fiscal emergency plan. So we're just taking the plan that's been passed, converting it into the form of the tax budget, getting that approved by the auditor of state, and then presenting that as our tax budget because it projects expenditures and revenues for the next year of 2020, and that's already been done in the fiscal emergency plan.
Thank you, Mr. Stith. Any questions? There are no requests to address council on other topics. Means we're on to unfinished business. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Actually, I see it here on the agenda, the mayor's veto, so I'll just address my comments on that later. So.
Okay. So the only item that I had under unfinished business, at our last regular meeting, we discussed getting feedback to the president of council regarding the standing rules of council. There was no additional comments made. So we can consider adopting what was recommended as of February 26th edition of the standing rules of council. Mr. Sanker?
Are you looking for a proposal, a vote to do that now, or to put it on the agenda for the next meeting as an agenda item to vote on?
This came out of your committee, so I will defer to you.
Then we'll put it on the next agenda for a vote on council, so the general public can see what's involved with it as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sanker.
Yep, thank you.
Any other unfinished business? Any new business? Mr. Sanker?
Yes, Madam President, just real quick, I know people have seen the work going on in the north side of Forest Avenue going up the hill, which is proceeding. However, you will see down right before the bridge, I believe starting next Monday, will be a lane closure there. If you've been by Siemens over there right before the bridge, you can see some of the concrete slabs are sinking, and so they're going to be starting next Monday to review that, dig into that, and find out what the source is. So there probably will be a lane closure starting next Monday on entering from the south heading north, going into the bridge on Forest Avenue. Cannot tell you how long it may take, but it could be a few days. That will be down to one lane in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. Mr. Braden?
Well, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I heard some of you, I just want to make you aware that I will be out of town the week of the 28th, which is our next regular council meeting. The reason I just wanted to mention that because I think there's some other one or two of us that will not be here. So if there's any problems, I'd like to address them before that. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. I know I will not be available for that May 28th meeting either.
I've heard a couple of us mention that, so I wanted to, didn't want to be the one not to mention it.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Any other unfinished business, or new business, sorry, new business?
Sorry?
Are you out of town?
Yeah, I will not be there. And Ms. Stevenson, I don't think will be there as well.
Correct.
So we'll, it sounds like there'll only be 4 council members. If anybody else is out of town, though, we should just cancel the meeting because you won't have enough to do anything. But it sounds like we'll. Cool.
There was a joke that some people were invited to go. We're probably all going different places. Mr. Bonsall.
Okay, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Okay, I have a few items. I'll get the easy one out of the way first. So the Off-Pike Market's going to be hosting they've combined with the Norwood Farmers Market, so they're going to do monthly markets on Mills Avenue right next to Victory Park. And so there will be a lot of things happening to kind of coincide with that. But the big thing is I think it's 10 to 2, if I'm correct. So this Saturday, 10 to 2 is the very first Off-Pike Market. The mayor has announced that on Facebook that he is going to open up the market house that's there. So people will be able to walk in some feet into the market house and kind of see what it actually looks like in there. That'd be the old safety lane for some people that were here at that point. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity for residents. There's going to be a lot of programming all around to keep people busy. So I think it's going to be a really great time. And I just want to congratulate them on that first market when they get it done, and hope that it's pretty well attended.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. So I've been probably won't be surprised to hear this, but I've been sending quite a few emails to the Safety Service Director in the past couple of weeks, and we haven't gotten any replies. So I will like to ask that a letter be sent to, I'll have a couple letters coming, but this would be the first one. A letter be sent to the Safety Service Director inquiring about the status of the following traffic light and safety issues. So the first one would be, and it's all one letter, but just these 3 items. The first one's the traffic signal that's completely inoperable at Ross and Section. It's just been long enough. We've got to get an update on that, and I'm not sure why it's still inoperable. The second is the traffic signal at Williams and Floral, missing one of the signal heads. There's just one signal head there. The other one, I think, a semi or something hit it, so there's only one. I've had people talk to people about this. They're like, well, maybe there's always only been one. It's like, nope, I can assure you that there are definitely 2. And so anyways, that signal was hit, so it needs to get fixed. I just don't know what the update is there. So that's the traffic signal at Williams and Floral. The third item is at Montgomery and Norwood and Sanker Boulevard, Norwood Avenue and Sanker Boulevard. There was a study that was supposed to be completed, so the request is we'd like to get an update on the traffic study that was supposed to be conducted for the traffic signal or traffic intersection at Montgomery and Norwood Avenue and Sanker Boulevard. That's like the worst intersection in the city when it comes to just backups on a pretty regular basis in the afternoon. So it'd be really great for, I mean, a lot of residents know to just avoid that area at certain times, and I know I always avoid it. However, it's very frustrating when you forget and just get caught in it. So I can work with the clerk of council to get the wording of it, but really like to see that sent.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you very much. So I sent an email to the Safety Service Director on March 31st. There's a water break, some kind of a water line break on Indian Mound Avenue, 2381 specifically, where there's water that's just, 2381, I think it's like a couple houses from the Tower Park Drive. But there's essentially somewhere in that hill, and the homeowner doesn't know if it's her responsibility or the city's, nobody really will talk to her. But somewhere in that hill, there's water that's just gushing out and slowly just going down Indian Mound. And it's water that we're all paying for because it's we're being billed for it by the city or Cincinnati Water Works. So it's been happening 24 hours a day for quite a long time. The owner's in the dark. We'd like to get an update on what is going on with 2381 and request that the Safety Service Director, I've given the cell phone number and the email address. I think I have here. Yes, I've given the cell phone number, email address of the resident. I would like to request that he reach out to that resident and communicate what's going on.
What was that address again?
2381 Indian Mountain. And there's also, well, I won't even go there, but there's.
Just an underground
Acting Mayor Lake, can you?
I've questioned that in the past, and I was told that it's an underground aquifer, that there isn't any water, but I've questioned it in the past because it runs all the time. In the winter, it's solid ice coming down there. I don't know, Mr. Sanker, I don't know if you've got any information or if you've understood anything about it or gotten any. Basically, I was told there was an underground aquifer there.
Mr. Sanker?
You're on the right track, Madam President. I mean, Madam Acting Mayor.
Acting.
Mr. Monsell?
Yeah, I would be very curious at how they're determining that that's an underground aquifer, because just the rate of water that's happening and the consistency, it is. Yes, to me, it's a huge concern. I'd rather at least. It'd be nice if I still think the letter is still valid. That somebody from the city needs to reach out to the homeowner to talk about that.
Thank you, Mr. Monsell.
Yep.
Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you. Assistant Chief Tom McCabe has reached out to me regarding a fire engine purchase, and I'd like to have a letter sent to. So essentially, we approved a fire engine purchase to be spending money on it next year, but essentially, he wants to consider getting the fire engine this year because we just make the first payment next year. Well, it's not really up to me on that one. I mean, essentially the Fiscal Recovery Commission has to approve that one too, but it's not really up to me on if we purchase it this year or not. We just approve the funding, and we have it in the plan. So we'd like to get a letter sent to the Safety Service Director to ask him if he wants to move forward with a fire engine purchase this year. That one's pretty basic. Hopefully he'll respond.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you. So another email to the Safety Service Director. So there's a pocket park at Ellesmere and Floral that is owned by the city, and there's like a little bench and stuff with it, but it's never mowed. The residents nearby have to constantly mow it. So I'd like to ask to send a letter to the Safety Service Director asking that that pocket park get mowed on a regular basis, as would any park that the city owns.
Called that in.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall, did you have an intention of scheduling another committee meeting?
We are going to schedule, you're talking about the Finance Committee meeting?
Yes.
Yes. There will be a Finance Committee meeting scheduled for June 11th at 6:30 p.m. in Council Chambers. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Okay, yes.
That reminded me, and I'm not sure, I can't remember if you told me, Mr. Stiff, there's going to be construction in here? No? I can't remember who told me.
There is going to be construction in here,
Mr. Gary?
I think,
Yeah,
within the next few days.
to fix the floor.
To fix the floor.
Hopefully they fix the leak.
My understanding is that most of the benches will be taken out. They'll leave a couple of benches for folks to be in here for court and for council meetings or committee meetings, but they'll be fixing the floor and then replacing the tiles, so there may be some construction. So if you're going to have meetings, you might want to check the condition of the room to make sure that it's available.
Who would have the...
You might want to have the lights on before you walk into the place, so that you don't find yourself on the first floor.
Who would we need to check with on an update?
I will check with the Safety Service Director tomorrow, and I will send out an email to you all.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor. Appreciate that. Hate to see anybody hurt during the process of that repair. Is there any other new business? All right, moving on to communication. The first is a letter from Chuck Barlow regarding the earnings tax ordinance.
Dear Mayor Williams, in response to your letter dated April 30th, 2019 regarding earnings tax ordinance, yes, there is a section of the new ordinance that requires landlords to submit tenant lists. It is ordinance number 38-2015, 182.23, rental and leased property. This section was also part of the previous ordinance. We periodically send out reminder letters. Some landlords are diligent in their compliance, others are not as diligent. Those who refuse to comply are subject to ordinance number 38-2015, 182.99, violations, penalties. As to your final question, if the landlords are not complying, why not? I don't have that answer. That is a question for one of the landlords. Sincerely, Chuck Barlow, Tax Commissioner, City of Norwood.
Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file the letter.
Mr. Clark, second. Call, any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you. I would actually question whether this is even like constitutional for us to require apartment owners to do this, but with that, that's for another topic for another day. I just think it's interesting, and I'm not sure why that's required if we don't have to send lists of adults that live in a normal house. But anyways, it's very interesting. So anyways, I think it'll be something more to look into to see if this is actually allowed. But if it is, then people should probably be complying.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you, Madam President. I am in compliance, in case the mayor wants to know that. I actually, just for your information, I put it in my leases that I am giving this information to the tax department.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanrahan. Any other discussion? The motion on the floor is to receive and file a letter. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
All in favor? Thanks. The second item is the letter from Mayor Williams regarding the mayor's court fines for April 2019.
Dear Madam President and members of council, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of April 2019. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Thomas F. Williams, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you. Move to receive and file the letter.
Is there a second? Mr. Sanker. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
Motion passes. The third communication we'll get to in just a moment. I do want to just note that the fourth communication was already considered. So the third communication will be our last under communication. Mayor Williams, a letter from Mayor Williams regarding the resolution veto.
So the resolution was passed by council on April 30th. It was vetoed by Mayor Williams on May the 3rd with the following notation. The four members of Norwood City Council, James Bonsall, Marilyn Hanrahan, Eric Thompson, and Andrew Clark, should be ashamed of their passage of the resolution condemning the Service Safety Director's email. The council did not even have the emails at the meeting. They relied on social media rather than even cursory investigation. Not one member even inquired to request any additional information. This was a sad, unprofessional act by four members of this council. The hypocrisy of these members is shameful.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I don't want to get into a angry match with the mayor for his sake, but I'll just say that there's multiple falsities in his statement, and his statement that we didn't have the emails at the council meeting is not true, because we did have them. In addition, multiple council members reached out to the police chief to get the additional emails that we didn't have in between. And so, there was no reason. I don't know how many of us reached out directly to the mayor, but frankly, there was really no reason to, because the mayor is always going to defend, his friend and the safety service director. And so it was a waste of time. And so I think that the passage of the resolution, it was a balanced resolution that acknowledged disagreements and acknowledged that we need to all be respectful of each other. I think it was a well-worded, I think it was a good resolution that really even he should be able to get behind. But it's unfortunate that he didn't. And so now we're continuing to talk about this instead of moving on to other city business. I will say that there'll be multiple of us that won't be at the council meeting on the next one in May, I guess May 28th. So I would recommend that we add this to the agenda, and I'll make a motion that we add the overriding of the veto to the agenda for the June 11th council meeting.
Mrs. Hanrahan.
Thank you. I'd like to echo what Mr. Bonsall stated. I completely agree with him. I do not regret what we did. I believe we did the right thing, because there's really no wrong time to do the right thing, and I believe we did do the right thing on this. Thank you.
Okay, that was a hand. Mr. Thompson? I wasn't certain.
I'm not sure I'll be here at the 11th. So I don't have my vacation on my calendar on my phone. So I just to respond directly, I'm not in the slightest bit ashamed of what we did, nor do I find it hypocritical in any way. And I think just this unfortunately points out the reason why the police felt the need to go to social media to air their grievances, because I have a feeling this is we have a situation here where the people who brought up what we felt was an error and tried to address it are saying that we shouldn't be ashamed, while the person who made the error, debatable based on people's opinions, but the person who made the error isn't called out in any way. That's to me, that creates a toxic work environment where somebody can't raise their hand because the hand raisers and the people who call them or who address those situations are labeled as being hypocrites. So it's a shame. I'm sorry. I just want to apologize to the employees of our city. I believe that we did what we could as a council, and I suppose in another meeting we will address whether we override the veto or not. But I'm sorry it came to this.
Acting Mayor Lake, do you have any insight on this?
No, I inquired in with the law department, and by law, in Title VII, you have to wait a minimum of 10 days after notification of the veto. There's no, Mr. Gary confirmed that there was nothing in the Ohio Revised Code that says that you're limited in when you consider an override on the back end. So whenever it's up to you. So this is your official notification. You cannot act for 10 days, but you can act at any time after that.
Thank you. The communication has been read. Mr. Braden?
I'm sorry, do we need a motion to receive and file the letter?
Mr. Bonsall did that.
Well,
I believe that because this is a veto, what we were just hearing is there's no action that can be taken for 10 days. And what I think I heard Mr. Bonsall suggesting is that consideration of any action after 10 days be placed on the agenda for the June 11th meeting or later, based on Mr. Thompson's comment that he would not be here.
Yeah.
Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you. Is there any, I think that it'd probably be better to put it on the June 25th meeting at this point. So is there anybody that won't be on the June 25th meeting that we know of?
So no need to receive and file the letter.
So I think you have to acknowledge, I would say that you should receive and file or do something to acknowledge that it was received.
Mr. Braden?
So I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the letter, please.
Mr. Sanker, second? Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bonsall?
Excellent. So I would like to make a motion to add this to the June 25th agenda, the override of the veto.
Seconded by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
No.
Mr. Braden?
No.
So 2 noes, 5 yeses, and for putting this on the June 25th agenda. We do not have any absent. Wait. Oh, Mr. Smith.
Madam President, Pro Tem, just as a point of order, the discussion was made during my report about the scheduling of the tax budget hearing on June 11th. We have to
Yes.
officially schedule that at this point before.
Thank you. I did note that, but I did not state that. There will be a public hearing for the tax budget at the June 11th council meeting, during the council meeting. Thank you, Mr. Stiff. Anything else that I might have overlooked?
Mr. Stiff, that does require publication, notification?
Yes, we will be communicating and forwarding the information to the clerk of council, and we have a written procedure for how that's performed.
Is your concern on timing?
That's what I was asking.
Okay.
Timing okay?
Yes,
We
10
have
days prior.
10 days, okay. Thank you, Mr. Stiff. Thank you, Acting Mayor. We will notice 10 days prior to June 11th at the minimum that there will be a public hearing to discuss the tax budget at the June 11th meeting of council. I'm pausing because I'm not certain. Do we need to excuse you?
Excuse the mayor?
Excuse the president of council.
I'm here. No.
Okay, great. So we don't have any absent members.
Nope.
Mr. Clark.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Was that a hand? Mr. Sanker, great. I don't think there's anything to discuss. Call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Yes. Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Sanker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
This meeting is hereby adjourned.